Good morning and welcome to the UCEA President Interview webinar. This is Alonzo Gilzine, graduate, research assistant, and doctoral student at UCEA headquarters at Michigan State University. I'm here to interview Dr. Cristobal Rodriguez as a part of his candidacy for UCEA President. Today, listeners will be hearing from Dr. Rodriguez, Associate Professor of Educational Leadership and Policy Studies at Howard University. His research interests include educational leadership and policy, equity, and Latino educational leadership. Welcome, Dr. Rodriguez. Let's begin with the first question.
Alonzo, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
No problem. So please tell us about your background and your scholarship as it relates to UCEA's mission and goals.
Yeah, I'm always proud to recognize where I'm from and what I've been through, and I put this always in my bio to recognize, born and raised in El Paso, in the borderlands, and that is important when you think about, Anzaldua's work on the borderlands and to bring, borderlands mentality and consciousness, a little bit what Du Bois called in double consciousness, but the indigenous kind of rooting in this kind of borderlands consciousness is that you also kind of learn to be able to not only either exist on one side or the other, but really in between and in all sides. And you're not just in one or the other, right? It also acknowledges that in between. And that really launches kind of my worldview with this kind of really fascinating experience to have studied abroad in Germany for a year as a U.S. Congressional Scholarship recipient in high school. And then coming back with just a whole other worldview as to a greater sense of responsibility to our communities, with a greater sense of service and how we align our work, and how that then connects to what I've done, I think, in my trajectory as it aligns to the UCA mission is this idea of being called to serve. And so that service, when you think about it, and we also speak about this to great lengths and take, it's part of our, if you will, our motto here at Howard, in truth and service. And what that means is how that connects to who we are as the University Council for Educational Administration is that we have a great responsibility to connect the dots, connecting the dots from the communities we serve, the students that we are connecting with in our own kind of spaces, but moreover, the students and communities that we have a responsibility throughout the educational system as we are, I think we have that responsibility as scholars, as educational leaders, as part of the University Council for Educational Administration to connect the dots and really take that to heart in the sense of how we influence our field and our discipline, how we look at even policy that shapes our practices and expectations and licensing to what we offer in our programs, what even our evaluation of institutional members looks like. All of that really is rooted in how we then take that and connect that down to how it's part of this entire kind of process and system to improving what I think is a great responsibility to improve in equity, opportunity, particularly for all of our communities, with additional efforts on equity that really recognize the inequities that are plaguing our most underserved communities by the system, and quite frankly, that the system failed, if you will. And that's where we recognize that there is a need, a responsibility, and for me, that work from where I came from, where I'm from, having served in communities in New Mexico at one point in both tribal communities and migrant communities, and really recognizing how the system was failing and seeing then my trajectory lead me to policy at the University of Texas and Ed policy, to really then going back to New Mexico and then ending up here at Howard, and then trying to have that conversation of what, what is our role and how do we address all of this. So it's been, for me, a kind of a powerful experience to even have had the opportunity to have worked at headquarters through my doctoral studies. As you will, Alonzo, as well. I think it's you use this great opportunity to connect and to really enhance your own pathway. And also even seeing how important it is to look at graduate student development overall, and that's where I found my first great role with UCA was as associate director of graduate student development back between 2010 and 2013. And again, aligning to this idea of how we serve, how we connect our work, our research, our advocacy to this conversation and alignment to who we are as an organization, as it transforms the system, as it influences the system, as we look at ourselves in our own institution and constantly reflect and examine our work to really, again, improve the entire educational system in ways that we need to really improve equity and opportunity. So that in a nutshell is how my roots have shaped my pathway to having this opportunity, but also this great sense of responsibility to step up and really being able to work with our colleagues to a greater degree in this capacity.
Thank you so very much for that answer. For our next question, we want to ask, could you discuss with us your scholarship, research projects, teaching, and/or service that can inform the work of UCEA, particularly the work of the executive committee?
You know, one of the things that I've been embarking on for the past couple of years, few years now, is given the current kind of state of politics and policies, and at some level almost like the sense of assault on our educational system again, as we've made some improvements, that there's a greater need, a greater demand, if you will, to really build coalitions, strategic coalitions, to build solidarity amongst each other, and to do so, in ways that are truly strategic and powerful across multiple communities, if you will. I find myself sometimes in a unique space here at Howard University as an HBCU that that's a conversation that when we talk to what our work really, the philosophy of our work and what it really represents, really puts me in this kind of position to look at my own research and what's missing in the conversation, if you will. And what I've realized is, while what's missing at some level intentionally, given the current state of politics, is that right now there's a lot of division or very much divisive politics playing out between our communities in a time when we really must have a greater sense of unity, a greater sense of coalition building and building solidarity for all of our communities. That I found myself in a really fascinating space based on who I am, where my family's from, and then being here at Howard University at the Mecca, if you will, and really being able to connect, how do we make sense of our historicities, our critical histories, and then moreover, how do we examine the system and how there are these, if you will, almost like parallel histories, parallel systems of oppression, parallel challenges across our communities, and being called to have this opportunity to how we can re-engage and examine ourselves to really build community, to enhance communities, to really then build these coalitions of advocacy. So one of the things we've been doing for the past few years in my work and collaborations, I've gone from this conversation of what it means to do this for the Latino community, given my experiences, but I've also feel that now our next step is how are we recognizing these kind of strategic coalitions and efforts to really enhance policy and educational leadership in particular. And what you see is there's always been coalitions. There's always been a history of collaborations. We know that between conversations between MLK and Cesar Chavez. We know that there's a history of collaborations even more recently. For example, we saw in ethnic studies efforts in Texas and California where Black and Latino scholars and scholars from who are indigenous studies as well, coming together to really bring this conversation and play out and improve our educational system from that perspective. And I think that's an important consideration. I think that's something that we need to highlight. I think that unique experience of coming from El Paso, being in the borderlands, with that borderlands, again, consciousness, being in the space like at Howard, and then trying to now connect the dots, not just in the preparation of our students, but in the research work that we've been building and enhancing, is then take this to the next level. So one of the things that we're working on now is we've done a couple of conference sessions around this idea. And now we're wanting to take the next step of looking at a special issue that really focuses on that. What does it look like to build solidarity, to build and develop coalitions across communities, to really advance educational opportunity and access and equity across all communities, and really examine that. We just feel that we're missing some of that and recognizing the power in that and how it's a part of really transforming our educational system. And I think that's where I'm really fascinated by having this opportunity that, I haven't been at a Hispanic serving institution. Now I haven't been at a HBCU, especially one like the Mecca at Howard. And then going to have this opportunity with UCA, to me, I just find myself fascinated by this alignment and where I'm at right now in my space and my thinking and my research, and how I connect the dots through that research conversation that we hope then plays out in a unique way to then foster that, and how it's going to shape and influence our community, our discipline, our academic community specifically, and the work that we take on as a national organization.
Thank you very much for that answer. So for our next question, you've served for 1 year on the executive committee. Tell us about that experience and how that has prepared you for the UCEA presidency.
Well, there's a part of me that kind of feels like, yeah, I'm still learning the ropes, and I recognize that there's the challenges, and for me, I'm always constantly trying to learn as we go with any position. It's always, even going back to my first year of teaching, that your first year of teaching, you ask yourself, like, what did my students really learn from me? Because you're just observing, you're just learning, and you're trying your best to keep up. And there's definitely that growth and learning is continuous overall, I believe. And that's the attitude I've taken with any kind of situation in my own kind of experiences, that you continue to grow and you continue to reflect moreover, and to keep thinking about how do we improve on and make things better. I've been fortunate that, prior to being called to serve on the council, on the committee, on the executive committee, that I had been really involved with UCA, not just through being an associate director of graduate student development, but then also being a plenum session rep for almost a little bit past 6 years for, again, both New Mexico State University, where I was faculty for 5 years, and then for another set of 3 or almost 4 years here at Howard University, until recently, because I wanted to have one of my colleagues to gain that experience and to enhance her engagement of what's happening nationally. And that's really a reflective of the conversation and role that UCA has, is how do we really take what we do in our communities and institutions in our states to this national kind of collaboration and really support each other as a community. And I think from those experiences has shaped to what I bring to the table. Then having had the opportunities that I've had in a very quick year, that I think when you couple all that together, I feel like there's definitely opportunity for me to keep this energy, to keep these ideas going that have aligned with this idea of what I offer uniquely to in the kind of conversations that we have at the executive committee level. I don't see it also, just to be clear, that I'm more of a person that really believes in deliberative practices and governance, and less about this idea of it's about just being the president. It's just about having this executive leadership role. And I'm more about this idea of how we really come together as a community, as a group, and as an executive committee in this case, and truly enhance this kind of nature of collaborative, deliberative efforts so that we can move ourselves. And that's one of the things that I think is powerful, that you begin to recognize that as a committee, we have this great responsibility to be deliberative and to step up. And there's probably what I've observed and experienced, and I appreciate the leadership that I've observed with both Tara and Gerardo, and now seeing with Bill, that we're seeing that, and that's a continuous kind of, I think that's a wonderful, powerful legacy that we're seeing in the executive committee, is that it's more about this kind of opportunity to deliberate as a group and to discuss and engage and even have those tough conversations that we need to have, given some of our challenges. And for me, I feel like, okay, I think those things put me again to this alignment of continuously being in a position where I'm trying to be as mindful and deliberative of all of the communities that we are responsible for in this whole process, and to be truly deliberative and to really, again, find ways how we can be strategic and empowering and being deliberative in our decision making and our connections and influence into how that then shapes not just the organization itself, but I think being in DC, also having this kind of opportunity of where's our conversation and footprint when it comes to other policy and other leadership organizations as well. And I think that's another aspect that I think lends itself very well to this opportunity. Having been here in DC, this is now my 7th year. And really one of the reasons why Howard made a powerful argument in bringing me to DC was, it's DC. If you're interested in policy, what better place? And I do see how we have shaped ourselves when it comes to either in CAPE or some of our influence with licensing conversations and NELP developments. But I think we need to play a greater role in what's shaping in the different organizations that's shaping national policy, federal policies, not just federal, but national policies that we see as well, whether it's through some of the organizations that have a footprint on shaping what does that look like at the K-12 level? What does that look like at the higher ed level? I think we need to just have that greater role as well. And I think that's the other unique kind of contribution that I bring to the table, that I hope to bring to the table as president of UCEA.
Thank you very much for that answer. And so for this last question, and you've already sort of gotten into this across the other questions, so I guess this is just asking for more elaboration. Share the reason why you've chosen to run for the UCEA president position and your vision for the future of UCEA.
Well, you know, that history really comes back, and I think it's one of the reasons why I've also decided to run on the executive committee. Of have been the associate director of graduate student development, really gave me this opportunity to examine, what our institutional members look like when it comes to really connecting the dots from that perspective. And because of that, what I realized that we really needed to do more from an organizational perspective of really recruiting more HBCUs into the conversation, right? Really recruiting more HSIs into the conversation as well. And having served at 2 of them, it means that it's not just how we influence, the field down. And when an institution applies for membership, it's not just about examining what they do, but also looking at how they can also help shape us as well at the same time. And I recognize that there's some great educational leadership programs at some of the HBCUs. And I've asked myself, why aren't they part of UCEA? And I think those are conversations that I've had with a couple institutions and said, we should have you, and we hope that, and anything we can do, let us know. But I think we need to do a little bit better about really putting out a strategic outreach effort that connects us to more HSIs and Hispanic serving institutions, as well as how we develop HBCUs as well in this conversation. But I think even more so, right? What does that look like for also connecting, even if it's not a research institution like we typically recognize, that we also look at how we develop and engage tribal colleges as part of the conversation as well, and connect and help shape and connect the dots to how we then connect to better serve our communities, particularly our indigenous and tribal communities, and how they can also help us as well. And that has to be, that conversation cannot be just one way. It has to be truly collaborative. So I think that's one area as a first step that is, I think, critically important to me in recognizing my own trajectory and the importance of that. But also, again, being back to this idea of being in this powerful space, having served such communities, to really then take this effort of being in a position to really enhance collaboration across communities, to really be more strategic in our coalitions and our efforts of building and enhancing solidarity, to be better advocates for our communities as we serve our own institutions and communities, as we serve the national conversation in educational leadership and policy, but also how we can bring that over to how we then reflect that and enhance our influence and footprint at the national level and federal levels. I think those are critically important areas that I think we can definitely be better on. So that's the other, if you will, second goal that I look forward to really connecting, is how those two things of really taking a look at how we're enhancing our institutional membership to really be strategic and look at who we're now including and being more inclusive in that regard, so that we can both grow each other and support each other. And then second, how we then look at how we organize and be deliberative as a greater, if you will, greater space of solidarity and coalition building for our institutions, our organizations, and our states, and as a national organization, and taking that to how we can be unique in our connections to, what's happening here in DC, what's happening, and how that shapes not just, again, federal policy, but even national policy. And I say that in a way because a good example is Common Core. Common Core was not a federal effort, but it was a state-to-state kind of national effort that came out of the National Governors Association, and of course, relationship to some of the book efforts, or publishing companies. But I think that's a good example how we have to be at the table at these different areas that is going to consider the important role and how leadership matters. Moreover, and how leadership preparation is part of these conversations and should be part of these conversations that we need to be present of to a greater degree. So there's I think the dimensions that I like to offer, and that I'm truly thrilled and excited about to have this opportunity to serve with an amazing group of people at the executive committee level, and moreover to serve with our institutional members and our folks in our plenum, that how we can really enhance all those efforts by really working with everybody in that way. So those are the two major components and areas that I'm excited about. And I hope to be able to make some progress regardless of whether I'm elected or not. I still have this great sense of responsibility to those, and as an executive committee member and wherever my roles and experiences take me.
Thank you so much for your time and thoughtful response. This interview will be made available to UCEA institutions and the plenum representatives prior to the UCEA annual convention. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alonzo, and anything I can do for you, let me know. I'm always happy to serve.